Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Guest interviews include entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Be sure to listen up. This is important because it's your money. Your money. Be sure to listen to Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie. Thursdays, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time on 98.7 The Coast.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette, broadcasting live from beautiful Wildwood, New Jersey. It's a nice, crisp evening here in the studios at 98.7 The Coast. And I'm very excited to be back on the air with you all. As promised last week, we will start with a little bit of news. I don't know if you all have heard yet, but Jussie Smollett, has been a very prominent case in the news, but he has been convicted of 5 counts of disorderly conduct, which has to do with lying to the police. And you may be asking yourself, why is she bringing this up on a money show? Well, you know my tagline is, it's important because it's your money. And if you live in Chicago, quite a bit of taxpayer money was spent to seek out and find the alleged perpetrators of the crime that Jussie Smollett lied about and said that was a source of racism, that he was attacked because he's black and he's gay, and he was attacked by Trump supporters. Now, anybody who is an actual Trump supporter knows that Trump supporters, first of all, are not far and wide in Chicago, Illinois. That's not like a big mega country area. Chicago, Illinois is a very, very liberal voting area. And, you know, for all the things that he said, he claimed that these mega people did. I'm like, it really sounds like something someone would say. Someone would say that thought they knew what a mega supporter would say, like not something an actual mega, like if you knew a mega supporter, then you would know that, like, that's not something that somebody who's a mega supporter, a Trump supporter, make America great again, would say again. And it was an attempt to make Trump supporters look like racist homophobes. And it was a complete and total lie. And of course, as soon as these accusations were made, the liberal media and the liberal celebrities all rallied behind him with no investigation, no research done, and just assumed it was true based on their theory that America is a racist country. And I can tell you, as somebody who is brown, that yes, there are racist people here and there. Occasionally you come upon them, but is America a racist country? No. Are black people being harassed constantly, as the liberal media would have you believe, and just regular victims of racism everywhere they go? Sorry, it's just not true. And I live in an area that's maybe like 5% people of color at most. Have I had some racist experiences? Sure. But is the country as a whole racist? But this is exactly what Jussie Smollett was trying to do, which is why the whole incident really angered me as a black person. And quite frankly, it takes away from situations where there is actually racism. So Jussie Smollett, judged by a jury of his peers, has been convicted of 5 counts. I don't know what there was 6 counts total. There was 1 count that he was innocent on, and I don't recall what that count was. But it was 5 counts of disorderly conduct and lying to the police and wasting the police's time and energy when they could be investigating, you know, all of the murders that are going on in Chicago. So if you had not heard that yet, just wanted to let everybody know that Jussie Smollett, actor at on the show Empire, has been convicted of 5 counts of disorderly conduct, lying to the police. You can't lie to the police. And quite honestly, I hope they throw the book at them. You can't do that. You can't lie to the police. You can't waste taxpayer money. There was lots of overtime that went into that, and cops could have been doing other things. They're very busy in Chicago. They could have been doing other stuff. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. Send your hate tweets to @MoneyTalkMel if you disagree. That's fine. Or you can jump on my Facebook page at Money Talk with Melanie. That's fine. And send your hate messages there. Or also, if you agree, please do. Contact me there. I'd love to hear from you. In other news, inflation is up to about 6%. And one expert says that this is devastating to everyday Americans. Rising prices need to be curbed. And I'm sure that if you've seen the prices at your local grocery store, the gas prices, that you probably agree that 6% inflation is devastating. Now, if you are listening to the daily press briefings, if you're a political junkie like I am, maybe you watch Jen Psaki on the press briefings every day, and they will lead you to believe that it's really not that bad. In fact, CNN produced an article last week that said not only is it not that bad, a little inflation is a good thing. You can deal with that. You guys can pay more. And as I said to someone on a show or interview that I was in last week, it's fine if you have the money, like the elites in Washington, like the elites in the media. But what about the rest of us who are living everyday middle-class lives who don't have that money, who that is really impacting, your wallet? And it's a whole problem. The fact that we have inflation that is so gosh darn high. One of the things that this expert said is that inflation is here to stay. It used to be, what the government was telling us, was that inflation was transitory, meaning that it was temporary. It wasn't going to be here all that long. But the Federal Reserve has since moved away from that messaging. And what they're saying is that actually inflation is going to be around to stay. And one of the reasons how the Fed is prolonging this is by keeping interest rates low, according to experts. And everyday Americans like you and me are having a very difficult time with food inflation, which is running way higher than 6%. Food inflation is running at about 30 and 40%. And this is according to Gilbert Garcia, who's a managing partner at Garcia, Hamilton and Associates. So it's very important to keep an eye on this inflation thing. And this is why my tagline is, it's very important because it's your money, because it is. The people that you vote for are driving these prices. The federal government's policies are driving inflation. What's going on at the Fed, which, by the way, I think I dropped this knowledge on you last week, is privately owned. Take a look at that. What the Fed is doing with inflation is exacerbating the problem that we have with inflation and all of these high prices. Another thing that I saw in the news last week, and I thought was really interesting, is that the progressive wing of Congress, and if you don't, so just to give you a little, it's the educator in me. I feel the need to define things. So in Congress, you have a really progressive left-wing part of Congress. Then you have like the regular old Democrats. Then you have the blue dog Democrats, if you can imagine. It's like on kind of like a scale, right? If you're looking at it. On the far left, you have the progressives. Then next to them, to the right of them, you have regular Democrats. Then to the right of them, you have your blue dogs, which are like conservative Democrats. Then you have your Republicans, and then you have your right-wing loonies. Yeah, I said it. I'm a Republican, but there's a faction of us, yes, indeed, that are right-wing loonies. And even as conservative as I am, I'm like, what are you guys doing? But anyway, the 4-day work week is gaining support among the progressives. And I mean, I guess I could refer to them as left-wing loonies, but the progressives in Congress are really campaigning for a 4-day work week. And I'm not talking about your regular 4-day work week like some people have where they do 4 12s, right? 4 12-hour days, and it's a 4-hour work week. No, what they are campaigning for is a 32-hour work week, where if you work over 32 hours, you get paid overtime. Now, this does not include people who are salaried or anything like that. This is only pertains to hourly workers. And what the progressives are saying is that it's a quality of life issue, that work-life balance is at stake, and that other countries who are developed have switched to a shorter work week years ago. That the United States is one of the few countries left in the world that still do a 40-hour work week, which is actually that's kind of true. I'm in this huge educator group on Facebook that's worldwide, and it has like 30,000 educators from all over the world in it. And at one point we were talking about maternity leave, and people from other countries were shocked that we had to work as much as we have to work here in the United States, and that we don't get like, a year's worth of paid maternity leave. That's not a thing in the United States, but in other countries, it is a thing. So the far left progressives are really working toward getting us a 32 hour work week. Who knows? Maybe I'll vote Democrat someday. 32-hour work week sounds actually doesn't pertain to me because I'm salaried. So that's that's out the window for me. But the liberals also claim that the studies back this up, that there was a study done in Japan and another study done likewise in New Zealand that has yielded positive results, that you're actually more productive on a 32-hour work week. I don't know about that. That you actually do less on a 40-hour work week, like, hop on Amazon or social media, and are not really quite as productive on a 40-hour work week. So the lefties are looking to get us a 32-hour work week. I don't think I'm mad at them for that. Like, I might have to keep an eye on that 32-hour work week thing. That's kind of good. Now, the other thing that Democrats are doing, I like to keep an eye on what's happening on the other side of the aisle. Like I told everyone last week when we started the show, at least here on 98.7 The Coast, that I'm a right-winger. I don't hide that. I'm really conservative in my views. And I think that that's fine. I don't think I'm a right-wing loony, but that depends on who you ask. I think I'm just a regular old run-of-the-mill right-thinking person. So, but I like to keep track of what's going on the other side of the aisle. What are the proposals? Does anything sound good? Heck, a broken clock is right twice a day, so it could happen. So another thing that is going on is that the Democrats are sounding the alarms on the disaster of child tax credit checks ending, as Senator Manchin, who's also a Democrat, signals that he's going to put the brakes on passing Biden's really big bill that's coming up, the Build Back Better bill. And one of the things that, of course, is included in that bill are the child tax credit checks. And if they don't pass that bill, then those checks are going to end. So, part of passing this kind of legislation, a lot has to do with the messaging. A lot has to do with what the media says about these bills. And, of course, because Senator Manchin is a senator in West Virginia, which is really kind of a purple-red kind of state, he's very careful about the Democrat legislation that he votes for. So he's not really a huge spender. So when you mention Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema, they're both from, I believe Senator Sinema is with Arizona, and they're both very from they're moderates. They're moderate Democrats. They're not far lefties. And so whenever this kind of drastic, in my opinion, radical legislation comes up, the senators that typically put the brakes on in the Senate are Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema. So, of course, some people are saying that it would be a tragedy if the child credit lapses, according to a Democrat insider, Senator Michael Bennet. But Joe Manchin, who's also a Democrat, but again a moderate, is not really feeling this legislation. What you have to remember, folks, those of you who are in favor of the child tax credit or in favor of the extra checks coming to your mailboxes, is that this is taxpayer money. This is not free money. This is your taxes. And you want to know why the taxes are so high. And, you know, one of the things that they've said about this legislation is that only people who make $400,000 or more are going to be affected by this legislation. And they say that as if that's okay. I don't feel as though that's okay. I don't feel as though you should be penalized for success. I hope one day to be wealthy enough to be targeted for one of these, for some of this legislation. But in the meantime, I don't think you should be demonized for making more money. They always say, you know, you should pay your fair share. Is your fair share 50% of what you make? That doesn't sound like a fair share. Like if you make $400,000 a year, let's just be honest. Do you really think that $200,000 in taxes to pay for somebody else's kids is reasonable? It doesn't sound reasonable to me as somebody who does not have kids. And one of the reasons I don't is because I never felt like I could afford it. Why should you pay for other people's kids? That does not, none of that makes sense for me. So I don't know how other people feel about it, but you can certainly tweet me at Money Talk Mel and tell me how you're feeling about that. You can actually call the station and tell us about it as well at 609-522-0987. You certainly could do that as well and tell me that you disagree or that you completely agree and then I'm rocking it and I'm totally on the right track. Now, there's another tax credit that's aimed at low to middle income workers that was expanded amid COVID-19, amid the pandemic. The people who stand to benefit most, I found was very interesting. I may switch to Democrat because childless black workers stand to benefit most from these changes. And that's according to the Build Back Better Act. And I've always wondered if there was ever going to be anything for the childless people that just work and work. Nobody ever throws us a bone. I'm just saying. No, we don't ever get any kind of like discounts or anything taken off of our taxes. Like we really, quite honestly, get killed. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but like our taxes are sky high. If you don't have any kids, forget about it. It's a wrap. You get absolutely murdered, especially once you get to a certain tax bracket. And don't get a side hustle. Then you really absolutely get killed when it comes to your taxes. So you have to be very, very careful about that. But lawmakers, or at least Democrat lawmakers, would like to extend that for another year with the Build Back Better Act. But it's a lot of money. We used to talk about these bills in terms of billions of dollars. Now we're throwing around trillion as if it's not a lot of money. And it really is quite a bit of money. One more item. Today, the Student Borrower Protection Center sent a letter to President Biden alongside of 207 other organizations saying that for the pause to student loan payments should be extended. Right now we're on a pause due to the pandemic, and what these people are saying is that the pause should be a bit longer. And another thing that I think I might possibly agree with the Democrats with as someone who has had a very expensive education. I'm not totally opposed to getting a little break for a while, but it's all in the way that Democrats propose these kinds of policies and legislation as if people should get free education. No, education shouldn't be free. You benefit from having education. I don't think that your education should necessarily be free. But this is what they're looking at, doing that extension. And my guess is, as bad as the polling is on the left side, that he's probably going to go ahead and do that. And the progressives really, really want them to do student loan forgiveness, which would be absolutely crazy. Just, One girl's opinion. Just saying that it would be totally crazy. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. Our guest tonight, which will be on the other side of the break, will be our first guest, Hans von Spakovsky. He's a legal fellow and manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative at the Heritage Foundation. Will be with us for the first hour, and then we're going to talk a little bit about investing with Candice Pendleton. In the second hour, I thank you for listening. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. We'll be right back.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Good evening. We're back. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette, and we're broadcasting live from beautiful Wildwood, New Jersey, here at 98.7 The Coast. Welcome. Our guest for the first hour is Hans von Spakovsky. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He is a senior legal fellow and manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative at the Heritage Foundation. He's been involved with the election process for 30 years. He served on the Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity and is a former commissioner on the Federal Election Commission. He served as counsel to Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Justice, enforcing federal voting rights law, and has served as a county election official administering elections in both Georgia and Virginia. And I'm very happy to have him on the show this evening to discuss election reform, since it's definitely in the news and there's lots of legislation moving around in Congress in regard to voting. And we have a midterm coming up in 22. So very important topic to discuss tonight. And without further ado, Hans von Spakovsky.
Hi, Melanie. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing just fine, thanks.
Thank you for coming on the show this evening. Did I get your name right?
You did.
Excellent. That's all. One of several worries that I have when I'm doing my show is pronouncing my guest's name correctly. Is there anything in your bio that you'd like the audience to know that I did not already mention?
No, I think you've gone through it all. I mean, the other big thing I think is important folks to know, because John Fund and I have written this book, Our Broken Elections, about the election process. I'm not just a lawyer who's been involved with the law governing elections, but as you said, I've actually had to work as a county election official in 2 different states administering elections. So, the practical experience that I got from that is all throughout the book that we have written.
Exactly. And it's a really important topic, as I talked about in the intro, particularly since there were so many accusations of voter fraud in 2020. Of course, there were accusations from the left of voter fraud in 2016. And as we are venturing into the election season for 2022 and the midterms, people are looking very carefully at that. And, of course, in the Congress, the Biden administration and the Democrats in the Congress are trying to pass all kinds of voting legislation, which a lot of the focus seems to be on African Americans and brown people being disenfranchised because of certain voting policies being passed. I have fundamental worries and questions about that. That's never been an issue for me, and I don't understand how the color thing is related. But I'm like, okay, because I've never had a problem voting. I don't know any actual, real people of color that have had issues voting. So,
well, in fact, Melanie, listen. That claim, that voter suppression claim, you need to understand. That term, voter suppression, didn't exist until a few years ago. It was created by Democratic focus groups because it sounds so terrible, and it's a way of trying to scare voters. But they use that term anytime they see an election reform that they don't like. They immediately say it's voter suppression. It's really an insulting behavior because, for example, and you know this, That term has constantly been used about the voter ID laws that have been put in place in places like Georgia and Indiana and elsewhere. And the thing is, look, every state that's passed an ID law has also put in a provision saying, look, if you don't have one, we'll give you one for free. Not only that, but look, those ID laws have been in place in places like Georgia and Indiana since the 2008 presidential election. So we've got a dozen years' worth of actual turnout data to know whether or not that claim that it somehow keeps people out of the polls is true. And the evidence is overwhelming that it's not true. And the reason is that I don't know how else to say it, the patronizingly racist attitude of the progressive left about voter ID, the idea that, for example, African Americans and Hispanics can't figure out how to get an ID. It's a racist attitude, and it has proven to be untrue. Georgia, their ID law was in place for the first time in 2008. They've had record registration and record turnout in their elections since then, including the turnout of African American and Hispanic voters there. So the idea that, for example, voter ID somehow suppresses votes, we know it's not true.
And I tell people this, and I'm like, if you don't believe me, look it up. Look up the statistics, because they're there for people to find. And I find it insulting as a black person. I'm going, when did we not know how to get voter ID? When did we not know how to apply for a basic ID? And quite frankly, we need ID to do everything.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, what's odd about this, too, is sometimes I get into debates with liberals about this, and I'll mention things like, buying a beer or cashing a check, and they'll say, well, that's not a constitutional right. Well, what I say to that is, you want to exercise your Second Amendment right to buy a gun? Guess what you're going to need? A government-issued photo ID. If you want to get a marriage license, the Supreme Court, as you know, a long time ago, the 1960s, ruled in a very famous case, Loving versus Virginia. Remember, that was the case where they threw out Virginia's law that banned interracial marriage.
Right.
And in that case, the Supreme Court said, look, the right to get married, that is a fundamental civil right. Well, you try you check the websites of almost every city and county in the country, and guess what you need to get a marriage license?
ID.
A government-issued photo ID.
Right. So
the idea that all of a sudden it's somehow wrong to ask for it when you're voting is just foolish. By the way, we're like the only Western democracy that doesn't routinely do that. Canada, Mexico, all the countries in Europe, all of them require an ID when you vote, and it's just common sense, which is, by the way, why the polling shows it is overwhelmingly supported by Americans. And it doesn't matter what their race is. It doesn't matter which party they represent. They all think voter ID, well, of course.
Right. I was going to say the statistics show that people on the left and the right think it's absolutely reasonable to have voter ID. It's only those, if you look at that political scale that I described in the outro before you got on, it's only the far left lefties, crazies, that think that, it's racist to require photo ID for voters. Come on now. And in my opinion, it's super insulting.
It is. And in fact, listen, I don't know if you've seen it, but the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, I think it's Mark Robinson, he's the first African-American to ever be elected as lieutenant governor in North Carolina. And he testified in front of the House committee this summer, and that's exactly what he said. He said it was not only an absurd claim, but he said he found it highly insulting.
I did too. Every time I hear it, I want to scream. Because it makes me think that you're saying that black folks are not intelligent enough, not savvy enough. The people who survived slavery in America, the people who have come up and thrived and survived atrocities here in America, now we can't seem to get ourselves together to get a voter ID? Come on now.
Well, I hate to tell you this, and I'm sure that some of your listeners may not believe it, but I've documented it. During the Obama administration, when Eric Holder was running the Justice Department, they filed a lawsuit against North Carolina's passage of a voter ID law. And do you know that the Justice Department actually brought in an expert witness who made exactly that claim in court?
Exactly.
That African Americans were not capable of dealing with an ID requirement in comparison to other voters. They actually said that. That got no publicity, no coverage. You and I both know that if the Republican Justice Department had done that, it would have been heavily criticized everywhere, as it should have been. But the Obama administration did it, and nobody wanted to say a word about what they were claiming in court.
That's exactly true. We're up against a hard break. We are on with Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation. Very glad to have you on the show tonight, sir. We're up against a hard break. We'll be back in a couple minutes.
This is important because it's your money. Your money. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're on with Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation, and we're talking to him about voter reform and the things that are going on as far as our voting laws and upcoming elections, and why this is just a very important topic to focus on. I wanted to ask you about another important kind of voting topic, which is you hear in the news, particularly in mainstream media, about the purging of voter rolls, and it sounds like something really horrible. But I can tell you, as someone who has done on the ground campaigning for different candidates, that you often will go to a person's door and that person is deceased. I received a ballot through the mail-in ballots last election cycle for someone who not only had not lived at that address for 15 years, but was also deceased. So in my mind, as somebody who's worked on several elections, purging the voter rolls is very important. What say you?
That you're absolutely right. And look, again, the progressive left makes all these claims about this that are just not true. It is really important to have accurate voter rolls for many different reasons, and it's important for states to do a good job of taking people off the rolls who have died or have moved out of state. Yet the left is constantly saying, oh, you shouldn't do that. You're trying to prevent people from voting. You're trying to take people who are eligible off the rolls. That is not what's going on with the states. Plus, their very claim that when you clean up voter rolls, you're going to prevent people from voting, because what they say is that people who are eligible are taken off the rolls. That is a complete and total lie, and let me tell you why. In 2002, Congress passed the Help America Vote Act, and one of its provisions was a requirement for provisional ballots. What that means is that, look, even if local election officials make a mistake, they take somebody off the voter rolls because they think they've moved, but it turns out they didn't. When that person goes to their polling place to vote, if they say, oh, that's a mistake, I still live here, I'm still eligible, election officials under federal law have to give them a provisional ballot. The voter fills it out, votes the ballot, and when election day is over, election officials are obligated to investigate and determine whether they made a mistake, and if they did, the vote is counted. So even when election officials make a mistake, no one is denied the ability to vote. So the very claim they're making that cleaning up voter rolls is going to lead to people not being able to vote, that is just a total lie.
But let's examine what happens if you don't clean up voter rolls. Let's take, for example, the ballot that I received of the deceased person who hadn't lived at that address for 15 years. What if I went ahead and sent that ballot in? What does that do to the accuracy and integrity of elections?
Oh, yeah, and I'll give you a very specific example, and people can look this up. In 2012, a woman ran for Congress in Maryland. Her name was Wendy Rosen. She won the Democratic primary. She was going to be the candidate up against the incumbent Republican congressman until somebody in her own party who didn't like her did opposition research on her and discovered that she was registered to vote in both Maryland and Florida and had voted in both states in multiple elections.
And ladies and gentlemen, they call that election fraud.
Exactly. She was convicted of election fraud. She was forced out of the race. But the point of that story is that election officials in Maryland and Florida didn't discover that because they weren't doing a good job of cleaning up their voter lists and finding people who've moved out of state. The only reason this was discovered was because somebody did opposition research on her. I'm willing to bet you that if she hadn't run for office, she could have gotten away with this for years.
That's exactly right. And therein lies the problem, which is why purging voter rolls is very important. It's not that people want to exclude people from voting, but we want to make sure that you only get one vote. And one of the things that the mainstream media does not do after the election, before the election, they're bombarding you with news about the elections and about the polls and about everything that's going on. But you know what gets like back page coverage? All the voter fraud that's discovered after the election. You don't hear much about that.
No, the media doesn't like covering stories like that, so they pay no attention to it.
Exactly right. They pay no attention at all. So it's very important that election lists are verified. And like I said, I've run call centers for elections. I've done, boots on the ground, door to door for different candidates. And there's never been a time when I haven't run into a deceased voter. It happens all the time. I think if voters at large knew how often that happened and how inaccurate voter rolls were, perhaps they would be more inclined to see the importance of purging the voter rolls and verifying how accurate the voter registration lists are. Now, another thing that has come up, and President Trump very famously talked about people who were not citizens that were able to vote. What do you find, what has your research found as far as people who are not here legally, who are not entitled to vote, but actually participating in the voting process?
Well, just a couple of years ago, the Public Interest Legal Foundation, which is a nonprofit group, sent a letter to county registrars across Virginia asking for something very simple. They said, we would like copies, they do this through federal law. We want copies of the files on any voters who contacted you and asked to be taken off the voter rolls because they're not a U.S. citizen. They uncovered...
Hold on. Wait, what?
Yeah. They uncovered 5,500 aliens who had contacted election officials in Virginia asking to be taken off the voter rolls, but not before they had cast 7,500 ballots. That's just one state.
And 7,500 ballots in a statewide election is definitely enough to swing an election.
Oh, we've had two statewide attorney general races in Georgia in the last 15 years decided by less than 1,000 votes. One of them was decided by less than 300 votes. On
a local level, I observed an election in my county that was decided by one vote, literally. So when we say every vote counts, we're not kidding about that. No. Those of us who are very politically active and we work for candidates and things like that, and we're like, every vote counts. It's really important you get to the election. We're not exaggerating. No, and anybody who doubts that, Google this story. 2 months ago, the L.A. district attorney criminally charged and indicted half a dozen individuals in Compton, California, the town the movie's about, including a member of the city council for absentee and other kinds of ballot fraud in a city council race. The city councilman who was indicted won his race by one vote. Oh, man. And see, that's something that'll raise the eyebrows of anyone. They're going to crawl completely up your voter hiney and find out what's going on there. If for no other reason, then your opposition's going to ask for a recount. They're going to want an audit. They're going to want all kinds of stuff done to make sure that you actually won that election. And voter fraud is very serious crime. Like, it's not a joke. When you get busted for voter fraud, you're going to do, like, real time.
Well, I would hope that was true because when you're committing fraud, you are violating one of the most basic and most important rights that we have, the right to fair and honest elections.
It is. And I'm sure that you've heard about I'm wondering what your opinion is on this. In New York, they are about to give 800,000, I believe, people who are not here legally, but who have been here for more than 30 days, to the right to vote in local elections. It's a very dicey kind of situation. The right to vote is kind of sacred. It's part of being an American citizen. In my opinion, it kind of kind of dilutes the appeal of becoming an American citizen. If you get all the rights on the front end, why would you work to do what you're supposed to do in order to become a citizen and gain all the rights that you're supposed to get as an American citizen? But that's what they're thinking about doing in New York City. Oh, no, and I think you're right about that. That is devaluing American citizenship, and you're giving folks. Look, voting is a privilege, and you're giving aliens that privilege without them having made the commitment to be a citizen and to take on the responsibilities of becoming a citizen, because there are a lot of responsibilities that go with being a citizen, including the rights and privileges you get. I think that is a huge mistake that New York City is making. Indeed, and ironically, one of the things that it really does is dilutes the power of what politicos refer to as the black vote. I have an entire problem with the fact that a black vote even exists, but that's a different conversation for a different show. Like, I don't think that one entity, one group of people based on the same color of skin should be voting the same way, because it gives politicians, in my opinion, an opportunity to manipulate that group of people. If we all vote as individuals and don't vote according to our skin color, then that makes politicians have to work harder for our vote, because they can't make assumptions based on our skin color. But when you are saying, okay, well, now 800,000 people who are here illegally can vote, well, who does that affect? It affects the next minority down, and that's black folks.
Yeah, particularly because the citizenship rate, as you know, of African Americans is extremely high. It's like 96, 97%. The citizenship rate of Hispanics is only about 60% in many places and less in others. So you are actually going to be diluting the vote of African Americans in New York City, something that normally is very much frowned upon under the Voting Rights Act.
It indeed is. So a lot of people don't look at it that way because, of course, when the media is talking about it, they don't talk about that part. They don't mention those statistics, but it's something to worry about, particularly if you're a black person that's been here, an American, your whole life, have been a good citizen, have been voting and doing what you're supposed to do, and now your vote's going to be diluted for people who have not really earned the right to do that. So it's a whole problem, and it's something that you should look at. One of the things, I read an article that you had about voter reform, and one of the things that you said that it's important to prevent vote trafficking. Can you explain to the audience what vote trafficking is? I think a lot of people don't know about this and don't realize that that's even a thing.
Sure. Look, in every state, you can vote with an absentee ballot. In some states, you need an excuse, and others you don't. In New York, for example, you do need an excuse to use an absentee ballot. But wherever you vote with an absentee ballot, you as the voter can mail the ballot back. You can personally deliver it to election officials. A member of your family can deliver it for you. In many places, a designated caregiver can deliver it if you're disabled or otherwise. But in about half the states, they are smart, and they ban anyone else from picking up and delivering your ballot. Unfortunately, the other half of the states, places like California, allow any third-party stranger to show up at your house and say, hey, I'll deliver your ballot for you. That is not a wise thing to do, because what it means is you're giving candidates, campaign staffers, party activists, and political consultants the ability to handle your ballot. That's a valuable commodity, your ballot. And you have no idea whether those people who have a stake in the outcome of the election are actually going to deliver your ballot.
And here's the thing.
Right.
It sounds really benign, right? That those people are being super helpful. But in states where this kind of thing is allowed, they do things like go to a senior citizen home and collect hundreds of ballots there. And be very helpful in delivering those ballots so that our seniors don't have to leave the comforts of their senior center to go to the polling places. Oh, so helpful of them. But the problem is they have a vested interest in those votes, and that's why ballot trafficking is a problem.
Well, right. Plus, it puts many of the prosecutions that have occurred over things like this is because the folks who show up at voters' doors, they don't just pick up the ballot. They go into the voter's house and they coerce and pressure the voter to vote a particular way, and sometimes they just fill out the ballot for the voter, putting their choices down, not the choices of the voters. It's just a bad idea for states to allow this, and the push, again, by the progressive left is to make this legal everywhere.
Exactly, on a federal level, these kinds of laws have always been left to the states. So, right. and so they're trying to federalize everything. And the reason why I'm kind of going into the dirty details behind voter integrity is because I want my listeners to know all what goes into your vote, all that goes into counting of the votes, and why voter integrity is so important. And why all of these little things that happen. It's funny, everybody who knows me, that's close to me in my circle, knows that on election day I always take the day off. Why? Because I'm working on some kind of election. I'm doing some type of election activity, whether it's being a challenger or working with a campaign or whatever it is that I'm doing. And the stuff that we're talking about, because I'm sure some people wonder, well, what exactly in the heck goes on that needs to be done on election day? Monitoring this kind of stuff is what needs to go on election day. Another thing that you said in your article was that it's important to allow election observers complete access to the election process from A to Z, right?
Yeah, absolutely important. Look, that's why our State Department sends teams of American observers to fledgling democracies around the world to observe their elections. And we have to have the same thing here. Every state needs strong laws that give candidates and political parties the ability to have observers everywhere, not only in polling places, but in the central headquarters of counties where the votes are being counted, because it's that kind of transparency that will help ensure that fraud is not occurring or that errors and mistakes aren't happening. They're also going to discount somebody's vote.
Exactly. And oftentimes these observers or challengers are on both sides of the aisle, but you do need to observe it from A to Z to keep everybody honest. There's a lot of finagling, to use a polite word, that can go on election day. So it's important that people on both sides of the aisle are able to observe these things, are able to make sure that everybody's being honest, that the people who are supposed to be voting are voting, that they're being counted the way they're supposed to be counted, and that there's no voting shenanigans, especially in some high stakes elections like the one we have coming up in 2022 for the midterms. That's going to determine the balance of Congress, and I personally think it's going to be a red wave bloodbath, but that's just my bias opinion of what's going to happen in 2022. We're on with Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation, and we're talking about voter integrity, the importance of voter integrity, and what to look for as far as the laws are concerned when we look at voter reform and voter integrity, and just keeping everybody honest. We appreciate having you on the show. We're up against a break, and I hope you'll come back with me on the other side of the break. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We'll be right back.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Guest interviews include entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Be sure to listen up. This is important because it's your money. Your money. Be sure to listen to Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie. Thursdays, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We're on with Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation, and we're talking to him about voter integrity. I wanted to ask you one more question before I let you go. I noticed that one of the things that you said in your article was that you wanted to prohibit early vote counting. And I was wondering if you could explain to the audience why that is. I mean, those of us who are political junkies, as soon as the polls close, we're watching for the early vote count, right? So you would think that that would be a positive thing, but why is that not a positive thing?
Well, by early vote counting, what I'm talking about is, as you know, most states have put in early voting where people can vote early, weeks before the election. And what I'm saying is that the votes that have been cast 3 weeks before election, 2 weeks before election, a week before election, should not be counted until the close of Election Day, when all the votes cast that day are starting to be counted. And the reason for it is very simple. If you start counting votes weeks before Election Day, if that information gets out,
and you know it will.
And you know it will. If it gets out, it may cause voters to not want to go vote. If they hear that their candidate is ahead, they may say, well, there's no point in me going to the polls and voting for him. Or if they hear that their candidate's losing, they may say, well, there's no point in me doing it. But let's say it's not publicly disclosed, but an election official who's got relations with one of the candidates secretly provides that information to a candidate to help them with their Get Out the Vote campaign, so they know, hey, we've got to get more votes in this precinct. We've got to get more votes in that precinct. It may give them an advantage in that race, and all of that is very risky and very dangerous. And you won't have that risk if you don't start counting the ballots until the end of Election Day.
That's exactly right. And particularly with national elections, when you're looking at the Electoral College and different states doing it different ways, it can really swing an election. It can cause an advantage, like you said. It could cause a disadvantage by suppressing the vote. A lot of people, people think about suppressing the vote as in, asking for voter ID. But one of the real ways voting gets suppressed is through polling and the media. And by allowing early vote counting, the media can manipulate that data, like you mentioned earlier. Election consultants and people who are working on campaigns can certainly manipulate that data and give their candidate an advantage when they have that information. Data is certainly king more and more as we work on elections. The more information you have, the better you can campaign, the more you can target voters and things like that. So if you have that early election data, then you certainly can change the way you are campaigning in certain areas.
No, that's right. So that's why I think it's a bad idea for states to do that.
It is truly a bad idea. Well, listen, I am very happy to have had you on tonight. I think that I know my pro producer here, John, said, I learned so much this hour. He was like, I said, you know this much about voting, more than you ever wanted to know about voting, but it's important. I think it's really...
Well, it is. But, Melanie, it's very clear that you know a lot about this from all the work that you've done in the political area.
I've done a little bit. A little bit in the political area. And so people, hopefully maybe people who are close to me that are listening are like, now I understand why she's so crazy about these crazy details, because these things are really important. When it comes to the vote, it just is. And I want your vote to count. Everybody who's listening, when you bother to go to the polls and you do your civic duty, I want your vote to count. So pay close attention to your representatives and how they're voting and what they're doing with election laws. Pay attention on the local level, on the state level, and particularly on the federal level, because right now what the Biden administration is really trying to do is do blanket federal voter registration laws that will affect everyone. And you need to pay attention to that and how that's going to affect the integrity of your vote. Hans von Spakovsky, I got that right. Thank you so much for being on Money Talk with Melanie. I so appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
Yep, have a great night.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We'll be right back.
Money Talk with Melanie.
Money Talk with Melanie.
Thursdays, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back, people. Thank you for listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette. Our first hour, we had Hans von Spakowski, who really did a great job telling us about our vote and voter integrity and just paying attention to the laws that they're planning on changing and how your vote is very important. And voter integrity is very important. And just when you want to maintain the integrity of your vote. Now, I have news for black women in Florida. I know that sounds like a strange transition, right? But wait till I tell you what it is. I might be moving to Florida because there's a new program that calls for hundreds of black women in Georgia to get $150 in guaranteed monthly income. Just guaranteed. No strings attached. There's an organization called In Her Hands that is calling for 650 black women to get the money with no conditions for 2 years. Now, the point is for them to gain financial stability, mental health, and combat the racial wealth gap. This is as per an article in the Huffington Post. Now, this is a topic that has come up from time to time, particularly during presidential years. I believe Andrew Yang was a proponent of this, and I think Pete Buttigieg also was a proponent of something called universal income. If I'm not mistaken, Facebook owner, now it's called Meta, Mark Zuckerberg is also a proponent of this policy called universal income. And the theory is if you just give people money, that it will raise their standard of living just by giving people money. Now, my theory on it, I was just joking about moving to Florida to get that to get that $850 a month, just guaranteed income for no reason. My theory, and it's based on, I think, some sound science, is that you have to have some skin in the game when you are getting money. I tend to find that it's human nature that if you don't have skin in the game, you tend not to appreciate things as much. Think about things that you get for free. Anything that you get for free. Let's face it, do you appreciate that quite as much as something that you've had to work for? That's just a general human principle. So this whole idea of universal income and just giving people money, in my opinion, is a bad one. And not only that, the money does not come from a government money tree. Those are taxpayers that pay that money. They're talking about taking taxpayer money and giving it to other people. So you're talking about transferring wealth from one person to another, saying, well, it's not fair that you have money and I don't, so we're just going to give some of your money to another person. We're just going to make a direct payment. And there are actually plenty of these experimental programs going on all over the country in little municipalities and cities. But I was doing some research for the show tonight, and I ran across that article, and I thought I'm going to talk to people about that article. But listen, the government never does anything small. They always ease it in. And that's one of the ways to kind of ease in universal income. We'll just give everybody money. It doesn't work that way. And if you've had a basic economics class, most people know that. When you flood the market with something, there's just less appreciation for it. It's less valued. It does absolutely just does not work that way. But it's an interesting program. And if you are one of the 650 people, women, black women, I don't know why it's black women. I think that's kind of weird, too. Like, I wonder what science that is based on. That they were just like, we're just going to pick. Like, are they picking them by income? Like, are they automatic? Like, are they low income black women? Are there any low income white people that could benefit from that? Or Asian people or Hispanic people? Like, I'm just wondering. Why did they, like, randomly pick black women? All the black women I know are super successful. I'm just kidding. But I know a lot of quite successful black women. So if you're, like, a successful black woman in Georgia, do you still get the $850 to, like, increase your income? I wonder. I don't know. But I thought it was an interesting article. And like I said, I've heard this before. It's called Universal Income. And Andrew Yang, who's a really smart guy, that was one of his platforms, was to introduce universal income on a federal level. And, like the guy, he's really smart, but glad he did not win. Just saying. I don't know if you all heard the story about the Better.com CEO who very unceremoniously fired 900 people on Zoom. So imagine this. You go to a Zoom meeting at your job, like a lot of us have been doing throughout the pandemic. We're working remotely, and you get scheduled for this Zoom meeting. And you're like, great, we're going to do a Zoom meeting with the CEO. How cool. This is what happened to the people at Better.com. Only what happened was, and they actually have somebody recorded it, and he actually is just not good at all with how he introduced the topic of, by the way, 900 of you are getting laid off. And he actually says, so we're going to lay off 900 people. And then he says, and unfortunately, if you're on this call, you're part of the 900 who are getting fired. Like, literally, that's how, like, when you're a CEO, you're supposed to know how to do this kind of stuff. Like, fire people, not fire them on a Zoom call all at once, but that's exactly what he did. Now, consequently, a lot of his executive team have also quit because of how just horribly the situation was handled. And many people from Better.com, some people are suing. He claimed it was because the reason why they were getting fired is because they weren't being productive. And apparently they used a threshold of productivity to decide who they were firing. But still, that's not a good way to fire people. And some people are definitely suing. And he has since offered an apology and said, I really did a bad job at firing you guys. And it's right before the holidays. That's another thing that's, like, really crappy. Like, not only, and this just happened last week. So not only did you get fired via Zoom unceremoniously, but it's right before Christmas. And come on, it was just a bad job done by these people. According to one former worker who reported to the Daily Beast, said that they were dumped like trash, and I don't disagree. I feel like they were totally dumped like trash. It was ridiculous how they treated these people, but that's exactly what they did. But he's since apologized. Would you accept somebody's apology who fired you via Zoom? I don't think that I would. Now, I've talked a lot about inflation and how inflation has impacted so many of us. And I ran across another great article, and I thought I would share it with the audience. And it's 7 tips on combating inflation with your personal finances. Kind of a good stuff to know. And it was, when I read the article, I was like, wow, I didn't know any of this. So I thought I'd share it with the audience. One of the first things it said was to understand your personal inflation rate versus your CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index. Okay. So what's your personal inflation rate? So we know that the general inflation rate right now is 6%. And then when you look at certain products, their inflation is even higher. Like with food, it's like in the 30%. But apparently we have something called a personal inflation rate. And you can look up an online calculator and figure out what your personal inflation rate is. Just go to Professor Google and look up personal inflation rate and online calculator, and you can calculate your personal inflation rate. Very important. You want to mitigate this inflation if you can. Another thing to do is incorporate inflation-friendly investments in your portfolio. Now, you may think that you don't have a portfolio, but you do. If you have a 401k with your job, you have a portfolio. If you have private investing, you have a portfolio. Talk to your guy. Even if it's an online investment portfolio, call them up. Chat with them. Those people are there for a reason. If you have a Vanguard account, if you have a TIAA CREF account, find out from your HR person who has your retirement account and call them up and talk to them. Figure out what's going on with that account. Plan for the higher interest rates. Higher interest rates come with higher inflation. One of the things that I talked about last week, and I talked about it a little bit on the outro, is what the Fed is doing with the interest rates. One of the reasons why inflation is exacerbated right now is because the interest rates are really low. As they raise the interest rates to try to handle the inflation, that's going to mean you're going to pay more money on your loans. So you need to plan ahead with that. You're going to make more return on your savings, but you're also going to pay more on your loans. Your interest rates, and a lot of people don't realize this, affect you in two ways. It affects the money that you borrow, meaning it's going to cost you more, but it also affects your return on your different saving strategies. So it's just something to think about. Examine and review your current mortgage. Like, make sure you have the lowest rate possible. Mitigate that inflation. Make sure you re-examine your mortgage and see what's going on there. Monitor your short-term cash equivalents. What does that mean? What that means is sometimes there's a disparity between your money market funds and traditional savings account. It used to be really huge. And if inflation persists, then those rates are going to rise. Keep an eye on what's happening with those accounts. And if you don't have a money market account, look into that. It's a really low risk kind of account, and you can still make some pretty good money on that. I would look into a money market for sure. Beware of the bond teeter-totter. The fact that bonds values decline as interest rates rise could make longer-term fixed-rate bond investments particularly vulnerable. And that really speaks to bond-type loans. Keep an eye on that situation because you want to mitigate your inflation impact. And then keep on keeping on. That's the seventh suggestion. I know people don't want to hear that you have to keep on keeping on. And wages have actually increased. But here's the problem. Here's why we don't feel it. So we talked earlier about how the inflation rate is at 6%, right? If you got a 3% raise last year, that's nice, but you're still in the hole by 3% because things are costing you 3% more. That's how those things happen. So you may be looking at your paycheck going, how come I feel like I still don't have money? How come I still feel like things are tight when I got a 3% raise this year? Well, that's because inflation is at 6%. So you're still in the hole by 3%. And a lot of people don't realize that there's a correlation between the money that you make and inflation. So just definitely keep that in mind as you're trudging along, and be careful who you vote for. Just saying. I know I keep reminding you guys of that, but it's very important. Pay attention to the policies. Pay attention to economics. There's so much information available these days on how economics affects your pocketbook. And the bottom line, like those of you on the left who are looking at Biden thinking he's doing a wonderful job, and you're wondering why his polling is so low, he's like in the 20s right now, people are voting their pocketbooks. They're looking at the cost of things and they're saying, my God, this is ridiculous. Why are the prices so high? And it's directly related to the federal policies that the Biden administration is putting in place. There's just no way around it. And like I said last week, don't believe me, look it up. Just saying. Don't believe believe me, absolutely look it up. And we're going to switch gears a little bit when we come back from the break. And we're going to have Candice Pendleton on as a guest. And we're going to talk about day trading. A lot of people like to day trade. I'm actually very interested in this. I don't know very much about it, but I know it's a thing. A lot of teenagers are involved in the day trading thing. And you can, and apparently you can make some pretty good money. So she's a veteran day trader, been doing it for 20 years. She's also a trading coach. So I was thinking she could come on and answer some basic questions about day trading and how you can make money and pay off some debt using the day trading method. So we'll have Candice Pendleton on when we come back from this break. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We'll be back in a minute.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie.
Money Talk with Melanie.
On 98.7 The Coast.
And we're back. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. Welcome back to the second hour. Our next guest is Candice Pendleton. She is a veteran day trader and trading coach. I'm very excited to have her on the show today because I wanted to talk a bit about day trading. I have heard a lot about day trading, that you can make goo gobs of money, and I'm planning to retire next year. I'm kidding. But I hear that you can make very good money day trading if you know what you're doing. There are, of course, critics who say that day trading is not a good thing and it's a very risky proposition. So I thought that I would get an expert on the show to talk to us about day trading. And without further ado, Candice Pendleton.
Hello, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to share with you and with your audience of all of the things. You're right. I mean, there's so many bad things that are, it has a bad reputation of day trading, and that's because they trade the stock market. Okay, so the stock market is exactly right. It's very expensive. It's extremely risky, and the stock market is the highest it's been ever. Every day.
It's really high. Now, before we get into the meat of the topic, I'd really love for you to tell the audience just a little bit about your background.
Oh, sure. Okay, so I didn't even know how to trade at all back in '88. I had two babies under the age of 2, and my husband unexpectedly died and left me with these babies that I just was not going to send them to daycare or turn them over for adoption. I had to figure out how to make money and stay at home. Well, Bill, my deceased husband, was a trader and an investor. And so I would watch over his shoulders of what he would do and how he would do, and I was fascinated by it, and I thought, okay, I can do that. So I started investing money, that I borrowed money to people that believed in me that I could do it, and I just blew out my first account. This was day trading the stock market. This was back in '88. Okay, so what the instructors were teaching you was what I learned was not correct. They were not teaching you how to be protective in the defense strategy. And if anybody that loves football knows that your defense is just as important as your offense. So I started trading. And my history, I literally went through the stock market. I said, okay, that's not right. I lost too much money. Then I tried it options. This was back in the 90s, and that didn't work. And so I started in 2000 creating my own system by pieces that I would pay for, and then I'd go to their classes, and I'd say, well, that doesn't work, but this part does. So I kind of pieced together my own system that is really simple. And it doesn't require math. It doesn't require you to figure out all these formulas, which sometimes these trading educators, they pile all this stuff on you so they can justify their high prices that they charge you for the class. And that's wrong. I think in my book, that's just wrong. I want people, especially women, and I just have to tell you, and all the men out there, you're welcome to come and try Commodities University, but for the women specifically, because it is a male-dominated field, as we know, absolutely true, and that women have a difficult time breaking into any kind of a male-dominated field, and not for any reason other than we've been fed lies that day trading, specifically, it's really intraday. Intraday trading, just for the details of it, and I'll explain later the difference. But we are in and out of the market quickly. Women actually make better traders than men because women know when to give up.
I know a lot of men who don't know when to give up. They just really
exactly right.
Really don't.
So they hold on to the. It's going to work. It's going to work. I am not going to be wrong. I'm not going to be. And they end up losing a ton. So women and the ones that at least are the really good traders, they're like, whoops, made a mistake. Let's get out and just recoup, because you can in a system that every day we take calculated risks, right? Everything that we do is a calculated risk. You get in the car, you go on the 405 freeway, you go on the Belt Parkway. It's a calculated risk. So trading is really a calculated risk, everything that we do. And you want to absolutely look for the highest probability trades. Well, how do you do that? Okay, there's 4 reasons why we lose money trading, period. Just 4 reasons only. It's fear, it's greed, it's your ego, and it's bad price action.
Now, see, none of that sounds like super hocus pocus, complicated formulas, or systems. None of those reasons sound like that.
Exactly. So it's a system that I have created, and what I did was by just explaining that the 4 reasons why we lose money, fear, greed, ego, and bad price action, I backed into it because I kept getting slaughtered. But it wasn't what I was doing wrong. It was that I was trading in bad price action. So I created a defense strategy, and I have a software where it just shows me, stay out. Don't even try to trade now. Wait for the market to come to you. And so I have never heard this taught before, but my first thing that I teach my students, brand new or even experienced traders, is that you have to identify if it's a pretty market or an ugly market, because you're going to be dancing with that market. And it's Mother Market, and she is a witch, and she will bite your ankles and chew on your toes, because it's the truth. It's the truth, because the markets, and I'm not talking about the stock market. The stock market, we trade the futures, and the futures are commodities. Everything you have on your desk, in your house, in your refrigerator is commodities. But we focus on trading the best and the easiest because they have a high volatility, and they're very liquid, meaning that you can get in and out of them really quickly without slippage or losing any money. And that's gold. Gold is one of the biggest movers in the entire world, and so is crude oil. So tell me how sexy that is to be able to control 100 barrels of crude oil for $1,000.
Okay.
Tell me how. Yeah.
So I want to pause and make sure that the audience understands that you're talking about trading a specific area of the market called commodities. And you said that commodities have to do with like anything that you have in your house, anything that's tangible, any kind of product, that those are commodities. Is that a good way
Correct.
to explain
Yes, that's
what
correct.
commodities
That's
are?
Yes, that's correct. And commodities and futures are an interchangeable word that means the same thing. But how much is crude oil going to be costing 2 months from now? So everybody focuses on the futures because whatever that baseline is, we work backwards from that in the real world. And that's the reason why, how come you always see crude oil gas going up, 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 up? But then when crude oil drops, you don't see it at your gas station. I mean, it is a manipulated market. Crude oil is manipulated. We know that already. But we as consumers have to protect ourselves. And when I came on, I was listening to you talk about how we have to dance harder to make the same amount of money because of inflation.
Right.
Okay. So how we do that in trading is that we identify the very pretty markets. And this is so easy and this is, again, no slight to men. Men can pick this up and trade in a heartbeat. But my focus is on reaching down and helping these women who have always said, gosh, that would be really cool, but how do I break into it? Because getting in the front door is the hard part. And when you overcome that by a really simple strategy, I'm going to show you this, 1, 2, 3, just do that, and lead them, by the way, how you get your account opened, and you can get live data, and you get all your charting software. And it might sound like it's all jargon right now and some crazy hoax, but it's not. It's really easy. And when I was the head coach for Lincoln Financial, I was the head coach to teach their women and to teach everyone in their futures department, and I created a 30-day challenge. Because Lincoln said to me, there's no way, you can't learn. And I said, I respectfully disagree, sir. I can teach your people in 30 days how to trade the futures and be effective and to start winning. So he hired me, and I did it. And it's not rocket science. It's taking away all the clutter. Get rid of all that stuff on your chart. Get rid of all that stuff in your brain. You don't need all to know everything except this. Follow the steps. And I do 1, 2, 3, no more than 3, because our brains, start forgetting number 4. Okay, what was number 1 now?
That's true.
That's true. So when we simplify it and we just make it like honest to goodness, like a 5th grader. A 5th grader could probably learn this. And now I wouldn't recommend it because you have to be 21 to have a contract.
Right.
But what I want to do, Melanie, this is my goal. This is just, and I know I hear you have the same goal, is to reach down into the ordinary Joe, the ordinary Jill, and say, come on up here and learn how you can protect yourself against what's going on right now. You have no control over the economy except when we vote. And you're right. People are voting with their wallets, all right? Now it's going to get worse, guys. It's not going to get better. It's the calm before the storm. And the fortunate thing of it is that there's been millionaires and billionaires made in this since the pandemic. 500 new billionaires made since the pandemic. Do you know who they are?
That's absolutely true. I actually had the privilege of speaking in front of our county Chamber of Commerce recently on the effect of COVID on personal wealth. And one of the things I talked about is how many people became billionaires during the pandemic. And you wouldn't think that was happening, but it certainly has been happening. There's been the emergence of new businesses, and there's areas of the market where there's certainly money to be made, and that's what's been going on.
Yes. And so many of us have been left behind. It's like watching the train go, and you're like, wait for me. Because we don't know why that some people... And I say this with all due respect. Some people have their eyes wide open, and they're like, how can I make this better? And that's the entrepreneurial mindset. So anybody who's listening to this and like, well, I'd really like to learn how to trade. It's really easy. Let me tell you what trading intraday. Now, I only trade intraday because I've been burned every other way.
So when you say intraday, you're saying you only do trades during the course of a day that happens that day.
Yes, exactly right.
That's all you're doing. Okay, got it.
Around the power times. Now, during the day, you could get bored to death. Day trading, the stock market, they open a position in the morning and they hold that position for 8 hours. So you're stuck to that computer. And plus, it takes $25,000 in the stock market to day trade. I mean, that's like, who wants that? Just to even start trading, and you have to leverage. So it's just not good. Most of my students have come over from the stock market because they realize, why am I doing that? I have all these rules. I can go to futures, which is elegantly simple.
Okay.
If you can just imagine.
We're up against a break, but when we get on the other side of the break, I want you to break down to the audience the difference between a trade and a position. Because there is a difference, and I want people to kind of get some really good information so that they know what the differences are, and they kind of know how to define things. And when they're reading articles about day trading, they do some follow-up, and they go to your website, Commodities University, they'll know what they're looking at. So we'll do that on the other side of the break. I'm on with Candice Pendleton. She's a veteran day trader and trading coach, and we're talking to her about the basics of day trading. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We'll be right back.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics.
Money Talk with Melanie
on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're on with Candice Pendleton, veteran day trader and trading coach, and we're talking to her about the basics of day trading. And she was threw some terms around, and I figured I wanted to clarify them a little bit, or actually allow her to clarify them a little bit, and tell us what the difference is between a trade and a position. How do they work together?
Okay, so a trade is basically the same thing. A trade is the verb. The trade is the actual process of placing an order. Okay, it's a basic, just to trade means that you are actually placing an order to buy or to sell a position. So the position is like a noun. So it's just the holding. If you say, I'm going to buy gold because I think gold is going up. So gold, let's say, is at 1,800, thereabouts. I'm going to buy a position. I'm going to trade and buy a position. Okay? And that position, and it can be in stocks or anything, but it's a position that you expect to either appreciate by going up, or if you're going like we are, we're contrarian, meaning that we are shorting experts. We are shorting specialists because everybody knows how to buy, and nobody knows how to sell. So we're getting ready for the market to turn. And the market, the U.S. stock market is the best place for capital because the world is in chaos, all right? And we are in chaos also, but we are stable. And so the U.S. stock market is going to continue to go up and pull back. There's going to be some pullbacks. And like you talked earlier, Melanie, about the teenagers that are in Robinhood. They're using Robinhood where they can buy a share, a portion, and they just know how to buy. So it's very dangerous because if they've got positions where long, if you think the market is going up, you buy. If you think the market is going to go down, you sell. You can't sell safely in the stock market, but you can in the futures market. So anybody out there that's even halfway interested or thinking about trading, let me just cover really briefly some really quick points, Melanie, that who trading is not for. Okay, because this is important.
Please do. It's very important. Please do.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to be bold here because we want to get to the chase. So trading, let me tell you who trading is for first, okay? Trading is for any kind of savvy investor that knows how to invest and knows that you have to take calculated risks. They're entrepreneurs. They really want to work for themselves to better the world. They don't really want to take a paycheck, even though many people have to take a paycheck, and they could be entrepreneurial spirits at heart. If somebody comes around their life like me and reaches down and says, come on up, you can do this, because it's the mindset of the entrepreneur, and we kind of know about that. That's a whole other subject, though. But they like adrenaline sports. They like the high speed. They're bored to death sitting there, playing bridge. They need to have that adrenaline junkie feeling. All right? They have patience. They learn patience with experience. They think in the long term, like wealth. The wealthy think in long term, decades. The poor think like today, tomorrow. I need it tomorrow. So they're willing to take, like I said, calculated risk, and they're not worried about losing an investment. Now, this is the difference, Melanie, because losing, that's a four-letter word we do not like to mention in any of our trading, educating, because it has a negative connotation that you lose money. It's a four-letter word. All right, when you're trading, it's an investment. And when you open up your trading account, you're investing in yourself. You're not gambling. Gambling is when you bet on someone else or something else. With trading, you're the performer, not someone else. And so you make an investment. You and I, it's just like you and I, Melanie, we go out and we buy a restaurant. We put in $10,000 and we open up and we've got some guy that's there, some girl that's there and knocks over all of our china and all of our investment. We don't sit there and cry and go, oh, my God, I'm a terrible person. No, you just go look at each other and you go, oh, well, it's going to happen. Let's get back in the game. Same thing with trading. It's an investment. So when we have a trade that doesn't work out, I teach my people how to immediately recognize when this A trade, because remember, we're grading all of our trades. We're only taking A trades. And it's really simple to learn the difference between an A trade and a D or an F trade. Really
I was about to ask you that. So there's grades from A to F.
Yes, exactly right. And I created those only because nobody else did. And why don't you just make it simple, guys? I mean, I was looking at 800 pages of documents that I paid $5,000 for. I was like, this is stupid. This is just theory. Just give me a simple 1, 2, 3 that I can do and move forward. And then once I accomplish that, then give me another 1, 2, 3. So it has to be kept in small bites. Otherwise, we get overwhelmed. This is a new language, see. It's like learning Chinese. You can't sit down and learn Chinese in the first day. You have to go through very slowly and learn the different language. You don't have to learn all the names and all the jargon and all that stuff. It comes very naturally after you pick it up. But because you're interested in it, Melanie, you need to know that what trade, and I need to your people, the audience, to know who is not right for trading. In case you're out there going, oh, I can do this, maybe yeah. It's not for the penny pinchers. It's not for somebody who watches every penny and says, oh, okay, I can't lose that, and watches on a daily basis or a weekly basis, and they can't stand to lose money, all right? If they're frugal, if they don't invest, they stuff their money in the mattress. They don't invest. They don't believe in investing. They have the money in their back pocket or under the rug. And if they're impatient and they just can't understand that in order to build your wealth, it takes time. Now, I coach my students in 1 year. I tell them, no, this is a college education. If I can teach you to earn $100,000 2 hours in the morning, you better believe that you need to put your dues in. And your dues are with me following this system. Make it simple. Just make it simple. If it's, the old KISS, make it simple. And I lay it out for them that if this does not make you money, don't pay attention to it. Learn it later. If you're interested in that, don't go onto the internet, look for futures. You'll go down the rabbit hole and you'll never come out.
That's very true. You have to be focused in your research. Otherwise, you will go down a rabbit hole. The great thing about the internet and technology is that we have access to lots of information. The bad thing about the internet and technology is that we have access to a lot of information.
Yes, right.
You have to be discriminating about how you do your research, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on, because I thought your website was really good and really simplistic, just really from a teaching perspective as far as how the trading situation works. Now, is there an app that you would suggest that's specifically for day trading and not for like trading everything, just stocks? Or is there something that specifically works for day trading?
Well, yes, and I'm not sure about the app because what 90% is on mobile now. And yet one thing I tell my people, please do not trade on your phone. It's 2 inches big, and you're talking about money here. Go to your desktop or big tablet and trade there. You can, absolutely. But when you are really focused on trading, you want to be hooked into a landline. You want to be hooked into the
now,
internet.
Is that because of the speed?
The speed.
Right.
You've got millions and millions of data that's coming through those lines, and it's the law of Newton's law. If it's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong. And you just want your money to be protected. And when you're plugged into a Cat 5, it's protected. It's much faster. And those of you, you're in New Jersey. My goodness, you're right up next to it. I'm over here in California, and my delay, we could be trading together. And we do this in live trade rooms where if I'm teaching and I'm in California, and there's students that are in New Jersey or New York or Chicago, they're like, I'm already in the trade, because that's how fast the data has to go. And if you're closer to Chicago, where the commodities markets are, you're already one step ahead of everybody else.
And you don't want your trades to lag because you have a slower internet connection.
Correct, because that's your money. And see, it's the hardest part of teaching. The system is really only 20%. And that's the methodology. That's the method of the A-trade explosion for me that I have drilled down. I said, now I know what an A-trade looks like. And it, I know how to identify it. I know how to teach my people the 3 easy steps to find it. But once they identify the A-trade and they get in the trade, the next is the 80% is between your ears, because we've been taught our whole life, don't lose money. So you have to disengage. Literally, you have to become the CEO of your boardroom, and you're imagining. And this is an imagination that you are on, a transformational journey where you need to imagine that you are the CEO on the 26th floor of your office building, and here is your trading desk, your trading group is in this room, and you cannot invite your orphan in. So you tell little Candy, who that's what they called me when I was growing up, here's your little pony, sweetheart. You're going to sit in the lobby, and I'm going to go out and into the trade room, but you're not allowed there because you're my orphan. All right? Now, you stay here and play, and I'll be back in a half an hour. Here's your toys. Come knock on the door if you need me. But you need to physically imagine it in your mind that you are disengaging from your orphan, because your orphan sits on one shoulder and your critic sits on the other. And the two of them fight constantly between themselves. And the critic, what I do when I'm getting ready to trade live money, I do with my little orphan, I hug her and give her a little pony and sit out there. And then I take the critic over to the window of the 26th floor, and I say, there you go, you witch. And I drop her, and I watch her drop to the ground.
I think that is a fantastic idea. And I think we should do that with our critics in general. I just think that's a really 100%. Good idea. Because that critic is alive and well. I feel like everyone has that critic, no matter what you're doing. I'm an educator by trade, in addition to like the zillion other things that I do. But I always have this inner dialogue going on, like a whole entire conversation that goes on. Yes. And I work with kids, but I work by myself as far as who I work with. But I feel like I work with two people because there's this conversation going on all day. But I think that I should take her and throw her out of a 10-story building. I think that's a very good idea. Right.
And you have to see, part of this is visualization, and part of the reason, again, why women, and I can't say it all the time, but most of the time, because we have that ability. We can, number one, know when a losing trade, get out quick and say, okay, I made a mistake, let's go, the trade didn't work out, let's go do something different, and not hold on to a loser. And also women can do the visualization with me because they feel comfortable. You know, we've done it our whole life about, visualizing things that we want and don't want. And men, a lot of times, and no disrespect men, but they think that's all woo-woo stuff. And it's like, it's not. It's real, because we can, whatever we believe in our mind and we think, our imagination is greater than anything else out there. Anything. If we imagine that we are a successful trader, and this is the visualization that we go to before in our morning routine, that we imagine that we see the most beautiful trade setting up, we execute effectively, and then when we're in that trade, we step back, and we're watching from above the ceiling. We are the CEO, and our team there, we have a warrior. We have a warrior that is my woman warrior. She's Zena, and you've seen her.
Yeah.
And she's got this sword, and this is my warrior who actually places the trades for me.
I like her.
Oh, she's so tough. She's got it together, and yet she's calm and quiet and disciplined. But the other person who's at this giant table now, I imagine Trump Towers, and this giant conference table, and the other one is the disciplinarian. And the disciplinarian is the one that when Zena, and because I give the orders, I'm the CEO, and I'm saying, Zena, strike. And Zena goes in and bam. And it's not me. I'm not pulling the trigger. Zena is. And then I've got the disciplinarian that if we stumble, which we do because we're human beings and we bring our emotions into the trading room like women, because we're full of emotions, and emotions are the most beautiful, wonderful thing out there. And emotions, we have to invite the right ones. And we don't invite fear and greed, because fear and greed and ego are what cause us to lose money. And they stay out in the lobby with the orphan.
And I feel like that's trading in everywhere. That's shopping. That's
yes.
that is us hitting up Amazon to buy something very specific and then ending up buying $300 worth of stuff. Like that is that's everywhere. So
that's everywhere.
When we get on the can I bring her back for one quick
Yes.
Okay, a couple more minutes on the other side of the break, because I do want to ask you something about the risk averse and a reward to risk ratio. Like maybe there's a formula that we can use to settle in to make us feel more comfortable with the trading environment. So you're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We're on with Candice Pendleton. I'm Melanie Collette. We'll be back on the other side of the break.
This is important because it's your money.
Your money.
Money Talk with Melanie
Money Talk with Melanie.
on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm Melanie Collette. I'm on with Candice Pendleton. And we are actually up against the clock. So, Candice, here's what I'm going to have you do. I want to give a shout out to a couple of people who are listening. My sister Anika is listening. My mommy Carol is listening. My girlfriend Eileen and her son Sam Keppel, who I didn't shout out last week, but apparently was listening. But I want you, my sister texted me and said, oh my gosh, I love her. Have her give out her information because I want to look her up. So go.
Yes. Okay. So commoditiesuniversity.com, just go there. You'll see that if people who don't know anything about futures, you can start at $7. And it's a 4-part video course that shows you and tells you a little bit about futures. It's for $7. You can see if you like it, if it resonates with you, and that's it. And if you want to reach me, you can reach me, Candace, with the A, Candace, at commoditiesuniversity.com. And that's my email. And, come on over and let me teach you how to trade. I don't care if you have zero experience at all. And if you're a woman, you get extra 10 points on that one, because I need to touch 1,000 women who have never traded before. I need this before I die. I'm getting old, honey, and it's like the days I don't want to leave this planet until I reach my goal of touching at least 1,000 women and changing their lives with this financial tool that we can easily learn how to trade.
Excellent. I love it. Thank you so much for doing the show. I'm going to have to bring you back. I'm going to bookmark your information. Thank you so much, Candace. Very informative. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I want to thank both my guests, Candice Pendleton and Hans. Let me make sure that I get his name correct, because I definitely want to thank him. Hans von Spakovsky, who was on earlier. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show. Thank you to everybody who is listening this evening. Come check us out next Thursday from 7 to 9 p.m. here on 98.7 The Coast. Have a pleasant evening. And remember, this is important because it's your money.